I think the future of African media is bright. It's really bright because our stories are endless. We will never run out of things to write or things to cover.
Africa is not all about negatives. There are positives too. So we should also amplify, echo, push those into those echo chambers.
It will take us journalists to make Africa beautiful to the rest of the world, for the world to see the beauty of Africa.
Hello and welcome to State of Africa. I'm Jeff Mote. Now, on this episode, we look at who shapes Africa's story and how the continent can harness its own media power. From homegrown digital platforms to diaspora-led storytelling, we explore how narratives influence investment, diplomacy, and confidence amongst Africans themselves. Joining me on today's episode are Christine Mungai from the continent, Senegalese freelance journalist Borso Tal, and we also have Tekla Wilkie, a news anchor with Nigeria's Television Authority. As always, we'd like you to, when you're part of this particular broadcast, you can share your socials on us and share your feedback as we get into this particular discussion. Now, I just want to jump right into this because we have a lot to unpack, ladies, and this is a continental conversation that we'll be having this particular morning from wherever we are from. And I'd like us to start with Christine on this particular conversation. Christine, good morning.
Good morning, Jeff.
Glad you could make time to be here this particular morning. And I want to start from you because we're looking at a media landscape that's quickly evolving. I want us to talk about the continent. How do you feel the continent has redefined African journalism in terms of the voices that are being amplified and the stories that we're telling?
The continent is a Pan-African newspaper. I know that sounds quite self-explanatory, but in the past few decades, Pan-African media has actually shrunk a lot. And even national newspapers and media houses have reduced their international coverage of Africa. This is something that you can testify to when you look at the number of pages in a typical newspaper today that cover Africa. Even from Nairobi, you can see that over the years it's been shrinking, and the same would go for news broadcasts. And we all know the reasons for that. It's because of the business model changing, the competition from digital, and that whole transition, which has been quite messy for media all over the world. And one of the first dockets that suffers is international news, foreign news, right? So the continent comes in to fill in that gap. We were founded in 2020, and we are a primarily WhatsApp-based distribution model of a newspaper. We also distribute on Signal and on email. And we are distributed as a PDF. So it's a fully designed PDF product, which is a really nice thing to get into when you compare that to the infinite scroll of social media or sometimes of websites. If you have a PDF newspaper, you have a cover, you have page one, you have the last page. It's in a finite package that you can get into on Saturday morning when we deliver our newspapers. And more importantly, we deliver that newspaper to where people are already spending their time. And in the African context, we know that that's WhatsApp. That's the number one social media platform that most people use for communication. And that's where the information about this continent reaches them, in that platform where they already are. One of our co-founders, Sipo Kings, early on in this journey, he said, we just want to meet readers where they are. And that has driven the continent's editorial decision-making and also distribution model for the past 5 years.
Thanks for that, Christine. And it's very interesting when you talk about the reduction of coverage on the African continent, by foreign media. And it's interesting because therein lies a paradox, because you're talking about a continent that's the fastest growing, has immense resources, has a lot going on the continent. So the question begs, Boso, you've been doing a lot of, freelance journalism. You're still covering content across, the continent. Why is that so? Is there not a business case and an editorial case for coverage of the African continent from where you stand, Borso?
as a freelancer, I'll begin with this. I think I have a luckier opportunity on my end to speak and write about more truthful narratives than if I were to belong to a newspaper outlet on the African continent. For many reasons, pressure, politics, and just many other ways of shutting down, like Christine mentioned, the media platforms and the media and the freedom of speech. So being a freelancer has given me that chance to go around more as a citizen and as a regular person and just speak with people directly and be able to share that in the non-formal ways, whether it's through social media, than if I were to be edited and kind of put in a line of understanding, depending on what standard I'm looking at. So that is important in the sharing of the narrative as well. So social media on one end is not always what we need in order to share the exact media when we look at the challenges, with AI and with just everything. At the same time, social media has helped me share information in non-conventional ways, and that is important in my line of work.
Just speak about the fact that we'd spoken about reduction of coverage, on the continent, and that's, at a global level, looking into Africa. What about appetite for coverage of Africa by Africans? Are they still as voracious wanting to know what's happening on their continent, or where does it stand with the coverage you're doing?
There's a lot of discouraging thought by Africans to follow African media. Like I said, because of all the pressure that the outlets may be getting from governments and from other powerful entities. So people are reading less, people are, following media outlets, but following them, the regular person that I talk to every single day doesn't have the trust to read what they need to find out from local media. And that is unfortunate to say, but it is the truth. So they rely more on social media news, if I can call it that way, than on regular media outlets. And that is further shrinking and further giving power to the media world on the continent. I think it's the same problem everywhere, whether it's in Senegal or in other countries. I'll speak for Senegal for now, but for the past years, people have lost a lot of trust in the media, and that shrinks a lot of power for those outlets, and that's quite unfortunate.
We'll be talking about that issue of the trust deficit, but I want to bring Tekla in as well because you spoke about government pressure, and she sits on that particular delicate balance where there is responsibility, for the state in terms of what the Nigerian Television Authority is carrying, but there's also the authentic African narrative that needs to be told, that the people want to hear. Tekla, I want you to weigh in on this as well in terms of that particular responsibility and balance between, being a state broadcaster and the priorities of the state vis-a-vis also telling authentic African narratives. How does one strike that balance as a state broadcaster and a journalist working for a state broadcaster?
One good thing that has happened to us as a people is the social media. While it gives voice to the voiceless and those who would hither do not even have a shot at being heard, there is a concern about authenticity, and the consumption of information. Because let's take it for instance, you put up fake news and it goes viral. What happens? People believe it. So it will take you 2 times the amount to deconstruct such information and give the authentic information. That in itself is a problem. And that has also shaped the minds of young people who are very, very vibrant on social media. So as traditional media practitioners, the one responsibility we have is to correct some of those misinformation and disinformation. We will not jump, there on those platforms and join the fray because, okay, that is a trend. We have a responsibility. We have a mandate. And one of the mandate really is to tell our stories from the true African perspective, and also be guided by some of the rules, that guide the practice of journalism. And that's what is missing on social media. There's unfettered access to that platform. It's not regulated. Anybody can come and say anything and get away with it. And sometimes it could be very, very, very destructive. So we as traditional media practitioners, we owe the people that responsibility to put out authentic information. Responsible journalism is one anchor, that guides our practice. Thank you.
Thanks for that. But I also want you to weigh in on the fact that even as you look at the responsibility, of authentic stories and stories that, carry that particular ethic with it as a journalist and, telling these particular truthful stories, from where you sit very uniquely, because there are priorities of state, priorities of government, and this is a communication channel that the government essentially should use to bring this awareness to the people. But as you said, you're still a journalist at heart and by craft. So how do you balance that particular line of telling these particular stories, authentic African stories, but also making sure you carry out what would be, the government's priorities, the state's priorities in using this particular communication channel?
If, for instance, let me give you an instance, and it comes from a place of reality. Now you have some brewing crisis somewhere, and you come all out and say something is brewing or there's been an accident. A pregnant woman can be watching that particular news, and her husband may be involved in that accident. So how do you tell that story? By mere looking at that, watching that news, you could lose another life, even 2 lives and more. But as a responsible journalist, you have to have that editorial discretion to tell the story in such a way that, well, you're trying to balance both ends of, the stick. Because now you owe it as a responsibility to inform, educate, entertain, and all of that to the public. But you also owe it to the state. Because who else would tell the state government story if not, like organs like us? And so is that balancing, is that editorial discretion, balancing act that needs to happen on both sides.
Thanks for that, Tekla. I want to hop back to Christine on this, because there's one thing that has come up time and time again. It's the issue of trust. It's the issue of misinformation, disinformation. And the theater where this really plays out is social media. That's where these particular stories come up and they travel so fast. And for the continent, which has opted to use this particular medium as a chosen medium for communication, how do you make sure that you verify your stories and that even as they go out, not only are they verified in that particular instance as they go out, but there's no risk of them being also used as fake news as well? Because this has happened quite a bit. So how do you make sure that in the field that you're playing, no one will use those particular stories and alter them on these particular channels, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's Signal, to then relay misinformation or fake news as well?
One is just our editorial process, which is really, really rigorous. Any journalist who has written for the continent can expect multiple rounds of edits and fact checking and all the things that we should do as journalists that I think sometimes as editors, in the interest of speed and time, are sometimes overlooked. But that shouldn't be happening. Like Tekla has said, there are journalistic standards to uphold either way. The other thing is that we can't really control how information is used once it's out. This is one thing that now you're not in control of it. However, being on WhatsApp and Signal primarily, these are closed networks. They're end-to-end encrypted and they're peer networks, right? It's not on the open internet like Facebook or Twitter. And what that means is that the distribution and how information travels and how our stories travel is not influenced by algorithms. There's no algorithm which is pushing our stories up or suppressing it. Our growth, to be quite honest, has been 100% organic from the beginning. People have subscribed, have asked to receive the newspaper, have shared it with their friends and families and professional networks. And so our reach and our visibility is not subject to like the whims of algorithms. And this is why the channel that we have chosen for distribution, gives us that kind of connection with the audience that we don't think we would get if we were distributed in like a more traditional sense of asking people to come and read on our website. We still do publish our original reporting on Substack. So that's where you can get the stories if you just want an individual link to the story. But Jeff, to be quite honest, misinformation is something that we as journalists have some role to play in, which is to do our bit, to do our job. If we do our job well, and we are able to think about how we are framing stories and how they land in the context and in the societies that we are reporting in, then we are in a much better place to get ahead of this. Unlike, for example, if we're relying on foreign correspondents who just like parachute in and out of our countries, they are decontextualized from our daily lives. And so for us as the continent, we prioritize African journalists reporting from their own communities in their own contexts, as opposed to, foreign correspondents who are kind of covering Africa in that sense.
Thanks for that, Christine. And I want to bounce to Borso on this as well, because there's something very key Christine has brought out in the fact that some of these correspondents might be decontextualized from our actual context and what's happening on the ground. Do you feel that Africa is still reliant on Western coverage when it comes to news and storytelling? That the African will find himself switching on TV and watching a foreign news station to get information that they trust on what's happening on the continent? Do we still have that reliance, Borso, from where you stand?
Well, there is this old saying that the day the lion will be able to tell its own story, that's when we will be able to know what truly happened during that battle. I think that says it all. The lion is trying to tell its own story from the ground, but at times that lion is so suppressed that it needs an external voice. And that external voice is what Senegal needed in the past years. For example, when we were going through the elections and the political crisis, local newspapers had difficulties sharing, from a authentic, using the Tekla, authentic voice, what was truly happening here at the time between 2021 and 2024. And we needed that external voice, we needed that external presence in order to share the information. But those foreign news journalists as well needed local journalists as myself when we were on the ground. So both parts need each other when covering stories. At the same time, it's important from my standpoint to be able to remain close to the continent, remain close to my people. And when I say that, it all depends. It goes from translating to understanding and sharing the information. And what do I share? Do I share it in the way that I need my international audience to understand and just perceive what's happening from their own understanding? Or am I truly sharing what the local voices are telling me to share? So that's where the difference comes in. And I can tell that I was given the chance to be able to represent or speak about Senegal, speak about West Africa to the international audience so that they can understand what was truly happening here. And that also allowed politicians to understand that as long as they suppress local newspapers at the time, international newspapers are going to take the ground. And that's something that we have to fight for. That's something that we have to work on to give more voices to local journalists, to give more voices. Senegal recently, I think this week, gave more power to whistleblowers. It's not only to tell who has money stored somewhere and who's doing something that's not good. But it's also a chance to kind of just give the voice to all those who know things that who cannot talk about it. It's quite dangerous. It's like it's giving voice to everyone, like Tekla said, and Christine mentioned that as well. This is especially using social media. Everyone can speak. And we have this responsibility to tell the truth and to be able to be close to the people at the same time, respect a certain standard. But that standard, I think, loses itself when we don't have the chance to respect somebody's voice and share it authentically. And that is important. So from a standpoint of a freelance journalist, I think remaining authentic and close to the people gives us that floor to open the avenues for African media.
Thanks for that, and also thanks for that, Borso. And I want to take what you said also and take it to Tekla as well, because as we look at this, the word that keeps on coming up is balance in terms of telling these particular stories and how we get this done as journalists. And a key facet of what we do is speaking truth to power. But looking in the context of Africa and where we sit, we also have very many stereotypes that come up of corruption, of poverty, of instability when you think about the continent. How does a journalist stick to this telling of these particular stories while at the same time not reinforcing these particular stereotypes? Because you're there to uncover and tell and speak truth to power, but in the back of your mind, this is all that's thought about your country or your continent. How do you think the storytellers, the journalists can, balance this as they tell their stories, Tekla?
Okay, the key word there is balance, as you rightly mentioned. While you amplify the challenges that bedevils, the continent, countries as they come, you should also have that mindset of not also damaging the brand called Africa and even your country, because that's what has happened. They say, oh, may South Africa not happen to you, may Senegal not happen to you, may Nigeria not happen to you. And this is something that, it's out there. People are watching, people are reading. Investors are also, observing quietly. And you want these people to come to you. If you keep projecting, oh, there is insecurity, there's this, there's that, while it's okay for you to say that, the manner, in your presentation and, churning out this news also counts. And that's where professionalism, kicks in. You don't just take things and throw them out. You should be able to curate it in such a way that it will represent authenticity. There's truth to it, but there's also the balance of, responsibility. That's keyword, responsibility. Churning out this news, broadcasting news with a responsible and ethical, mindset is very important. You want people to come to you and then you're saying, oh, it's insecure. How do you expect that to happen? How do you expect investors from the Western world to come to Africa when all you say is insecurity, killing, this, that, poverty? And how do you expect that? It's like you saying your house is dirty and then you want visitors to come in. There should be that balance of information dissemination and then also balance of pushing out things that are positive. Africa is not all about negatives. There are positives too. So we should also amplify, echo, push those into those echo chambers so that, the investors and the people will need to also help, because we can't build Africa on our own. Even though we can, we still need like some kind of collaboration with the Western world to be able to make this happen, right? So we need that balance. Balance, you said it before, and I'm re-echoing it. We need that balance. Push this information out, but at the same time, you owe that responsibility to also make, that, positive impact with the kind of information you push out.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Tekla, and a very rich conversation indeed we're having from Abuja, Dakar, and right here in Nairobi. I want us to take a short break now, but when you come back after the break, we dive deeper into this particular conversation that we're having. This is State of Africa. We take a short break, back in a bit. Welcome back to State of Africa. I'm Jeff Mote. Now, before the break, we explored Africa's evolving media platforms. Now, we turn to how we can build sustainable ecosystems that can have these stories compete on the global stage. If you're just joining us, I have Tekla Wilkie with me, Christine Mungai, and Borso Tal as we look into these particular issues. We're talking about this from, viewpoints from West Africa. We have Tekla, as well as Borso, and right here in Nairobi, joined by Christine. Welcome back, ladies, as we get into this particular conversation. And I want us to keep this conversation moving forward and speak about continental unity. When you look at the storytelling that we are having, when you look at the news that we're putting out there, can storytelling be a tool for continental unity? Is that possible? Because very many people say, because there's Francophone Africa, there's Anglophone Africa, there's Lusophone Africa, we can't possibly, have the same interests and concerns moving forward. Let me start with you, Christine, because as a Pan-African outlet, you have to think about, the continent as a whole as you churn out your content across. How can you use this as a tool for continental unity? Is it possible? And if so, how?
So we're an English language newspaper. And we make a very intentional effort to cover Francophone Africa, of course, with great hurdles, because we can only do that well if we have bilingual journalists in those countries. But we're exploring different kinds of solutions around that. In North Africa, for example, the majority of people speak Arabic, but we are in partnership with a North African organization called IGAB, which is kind of like they're our middleman. They work with the journalists in Arabic, and then they deliver the story to us in English. So those kind of editorial partnerships is a way to overcome that. But your question about whether it's possible, of course it's possible. We see that in Europe. In Europe, there are so many languages and so many countries. And Europe, almost each country has its own language. Yeah. So it's, we have linguistic nation states in Europe, but the European agenda is like very clear because of how strong the European Union is. Africa has much, much higher language diversity than anywhere else in the world. If we were to have nation states which are language-based the way it is in Europe, we would have 3,000 African countries. That's how diverse this continent is. And so I think we just work with our reality and with the situation the way it is right now, not really aspiring to emulate or to follow or to have a structure like there is in other parts of the world, just borrowing from the best of what's outside, but really coming up with a system and a structure that works for us, because we are not just a continent that is behind the other continents. I'm putting it in quotes. We are actually different. This is the thing. And we need to figure out what makes us who we are and start from there. This is one thing that I really appreciate about the continent, just that courage to make different decisions that we typically haven't seen in the media environment before. It wasn't an attempt to kind of catch up or like be like the New York Times or whatever it is. It's just a publication that is really ours. And I think we should just take that power and that autonomy and that freedom to create things that are actually ours.
Let's dig deeper into that as well. Borso, I want to end this as well, because Christine says it is possible. It can be done. It's being done elsewhere. But when you look at the realities on the ground, how do we have a citizen of the Gambia, with an appetite for what's happening in Eswatini, for example, and vice versa? How do you make sure that we truly bring this continent together in terms of the stories we're telling and the mediums we're using to tell these particular stories? It's worked elsewhere. How do we get ourselves to that particular level as well? What are your insights on that, Borso?
This reminds me of conversations I've had with some of my editors abroad, out of Africa, when they may not understand truly that as an African, I have my passport, but I have so many other things that I can use and that bring us together. I'm African, I'm Black, and in some other countries, I'm Muslim, and that connects me to people. I can enter Mali, I can enter places that they cannot go to. And this allows me to understand that, yes, we are divided geographically and maybe, culturally at times, but we are still Africa. And I don't see boundaries as an African, as a Senegalese person traveling to Gambia, or as a Senegalese person traveling all the way to Morocco, for example, following the migration route. I don't understand, I don't see the challenges that I may have. What I see instead is what connects me to the people that I'm going to meet. What do we share? Most of the people up north who are following the routes to Spain are from West Africa. So that alone connects us. And, those kind of little stories that we have between us, like what we call cousinage à plaisanterie, jokes, narrative, storytelling, like little jokes that bring us together. That breaks the ice. And I don't think we have many divisions, I think, and this brings back the question of why are we not covering enough what's going on in the Congo, for example, as Africans, newspapers, as African news outlets. We're not covering enough what's going on in other countries because it's far. It's not the same thing. It's not the same people. We are the same people. And that brings back the responsibility that Tekla was talking about. It's our responsibility as African journalists to see what is interesting for our people to understand of other countries that we share the same continent with. Focusing on the differences, focusing on what bring us apart is not helping the storytelling of the continent. And if we're not in an organized manner, like myself and in a freelance, my responsibility is to go around and just open the mic to everyone and just be able to share what another person from another place is going through when it comes to differences. Look at what's happened in Senegal. Kenya went through the same crisis somehow. Other countries went through crisis. We share that. That is something we have in common. Togo. All these countries have gone through crisis, are going through crisis with their politicians. And that brings us together. So it's easy. Language barrier could be something, so being a bilingual, like Christine says, is extremely important. Being able to transfer what somebody is saying in a most local language to English for the people to understand, or to French, is ideal. And understanding, in understanding what's going on. The narrative will change in our favor as African continent the day that we will understand that whatever happens in another country concerns the whole continent.
What do you feel are the investments needed, either in terms of infrastructure or training, so that we can have, African media that is truly credible? We're talking about thinking about the continent with no borders. How do we get there? Because there have to be some steps, some investments made either in infrastructure or training for us to get to this particular level. What's needed from where you stand?
The one point I would want to anchor here, and this is also leaning on what Bosu had said earlier, and Christy, what they said earlier. There's something called unity in diversity. Yes, we have diverse, cultures, and all of that. But if we have that unity of purpose to say, come, we need to tell our stories, and we need these stories to go far, to travel really far. Yes, the infrastructure is a very important factor. And how do you do that, as you have asked? Now, we can't turn our backs on the government. Every government needs to be responsible enough to invest in the media, in technology, because technology is what drives profession. You can't sit in your bedroom and expect to be heard if you don't have a smartphone, you don't have internet to be able to push some of these things. It shouldn't. The buck shouldn't stop on the table of the government. We should also have private partnership, because we're looking at, creating media powerhouses, on a regional level, at a continent level as well. You see, China, they have their own. They've been able to curate and unify themselves in channels like the CGTV. Same with India. Same with Asia, with the Al Jazeera. We should have like an African voice, that anchors and drive our stories far and wide. And how do we do that? Public-private partnership. Private investors can come in as well, and then individuals, with the wherewithal, can also come on board to ensure that trainings are happening. There is also availability of information, because again, you can't drive the media without enough information. How do you do that? You still need that content to be able to drive content. Then again, I'm also looking at pushing these narratives. You would need some of these cultural interventions in terms of storytelling, in our movies, in our music, in all of this. We can anchor some of these things, by doing so. Thank you.
Thanks for that, as well as we've spoken about the fact that government funds are indeed needed. We need public-private partnerships coming in as well to do this, and also other investors with the wherewithal to make this happen. Christine, as we look at the continent's business model, subscription-based at this particular point, I believe, how do we amplify this as we're talking about, getting this particular investment put in? Because as you can see, not only uniquely a unique issue to the African continent, global media is in search of new business models and new investments. How do we look at that so that we can actually establish what we're talking about, African media credibility? Tekla has put a very good example looking at each continent and what they have that essentially speaks for the continent as a medium. How does Africa get there investment-wise, Christine?
Africans do have a great desire to connect with each other. And this idea that we are not in, we wouldn't be able, someone in the Gambia wouldn't be interested in something that's happening in South Africa is actually not true. For us as the continent, we run reader surveys every year. And one of the things that we found is that just over almost 50% of our subscribers read our newspaper from cover to cover. And in a typical edition of the paper, we have stories from everywhere in the continent, and we don't have a situation where like Nigerians only read the Nigerian stories. That's actually not the case. We have curated a package of stories that people from all over can connect with, because in many ways, we are facing similar issues. And we have, like Borso said earlier, we have different levels of connecting with each other. And so I think when it comes to investment, it just starts from there. It starts from creating media products and creating ecosystems that work for us, that we want, that we are proud of. And then the investment will follow. I really don't believe in the opposite way of doing it, where it's like we are obsessed with what others think of our image, and then we are spending so much time trying to fix that image. I just think that, in the words of Toni Morrison, racism is really a distraction. It takes away time for creation, for actual creativity. I'm going to paraphrase what she said. She said, there'll always be something else. People say Africans don't have a history, so we set up history departments to prove that we have. Then people say we don't have art, and then we make it our business to show everyone that we have art. Then we don't have culture, and then now it becomes a whole thing of like, let's show them, and I know that there is like some value in debunking these erroneous representations of Africa, but for me, it's only to a point. At some point, it starts feeling like a distraction. Like we could be spending this energy on actually creating something for ourselves. And for me, I think that's where that conversation has to start.
Thanks for that, Christine. Build it, tell the story, and the investment will come. I hear from you on this particular one. Borso, I want to come to you as well, because even as we talk about investment and how we can get more funding into this particular space, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. policy also plays a very important part on how this will be done. Are there any policy gaps that you're seeing that are stifling, by and large, the evolution of media and getting media to that particular point where it's effectively telling the African story from a policy lens, from what you've seen so far with your work across the continent?
Now, when it comes to policy making, again, it's the same thing. We have to show enough from the ground to make the noise at the National Assembly, for example, or enough from the ground to say, okay, this cannot be overviewed, this cannot be ignored anymore. This is what's actually happening. And then we have to see how to redirect the policy in favor of the media. And that we are far from that. It's not something that is we have to be realistic. I think we're all going through the same, not censorship issue, but the same pressure that we have to suppress our voices as journalists, and so it takes a long route in order to get to where the international media are today. In terms of having the power over even sometimes governments. Even though there's a big big link there. But coming back to the continent, together, I think we need to go beyond what the policy says, go beyond what the investors say, and go for the people. And the more we go for the people will trust us back, and the more we'll be able to cover without feeling afraid of going from one area to another. That is important.
Even as we talk about censorship or suppression of particular stories by state, by government, we've also had the rapid, popularity of these particular digital media, social media platforms. Could this be the remedy that is coming up, for censorship? Is that what the continent will be using now to, get past those particular gatekeepers from where you stand? Is that what is happening, the innovation coming because of that necessity?
Our fight with the gatekeepers is going to be perpetual. Start distributing this newspaper on WhatsApp avoided some problems, some algorithmic gatekeeping problems, but these platforms are always changing their tactics and new things are coming up. And so a luta continua, as they say. I think we are not going to be in a utopia where all these challenges are fixed. It's just iterative. We just small steps get us to a destination in the end. So as the Bible says, we should not despise the days of small beginnings. Like the little things that we do add up in the end. And I think my parting shot would be just to say what I have said before. Let's just do the work, create something for ourselves that we are proud of, that we can stand on, that makes us happy. And ultimately, I think there has to be joy in the struggle. This work is very lonely and emotionally draining, exhausting. Sometimes you're facing physical threats. There are all kinds of things that you have to deal with. But at the end of the day, if we can protect those pockets of joy, and for me, I feel really happy at the end of a week when an edition is out. There is that sense of accomplishment, that joy, and that beauty, because being a PDF newspaper, we have a cover that is usually very visually striking. We engage illustrators, and there is room even for beauty in the work. And I think the future of African media is bright. It's really bright because our stories are endless. We will never run out of things to write or things to cover. And I just believe that we are that home of innovation and of solutions, if we can just put ourselves first.
Thank you so much for that, Christine. Tekla, I'll come to you as we get to your parting shot. What would be your one call to action for Africa to truly own its narrative on the global stage? As your parting shot, what would be that one call to the continent, Tekla?
We need to be very intentional about our narratives, our image. Christine said earlier that we we need to look inward. We may need to look inward to be able to, get our acts together first before we. While I align with that thought, I also believe that image is everything. Image is everything. And that is why even the Western world spends so much in curating images, the one they consume locally and the one they consume internationally. We should also adopt some of this, style of reportage and, media practice. While Africa has so much to give to the world, how we package ourselves is very important at the state level, at the regional level, at the continental level. All of these have to be united. We have to have like a uniform way of telling our story so that it's not about Bosu or Christine or Tekla. It's about Africa. It's about the Black race. We need to we need to sit on that table and sit firmly and look at them in the eye and say, yes, we have something to give to the world.
Thank you so much for that, Tekla. Borso, I come to you finally as we bring this conversation to a close. As a freelance journalist, as a journalist as a whole, we're always thinking about the following day's headline. I want to put you in the what headline would you like to see for Africa tomorrow? What does a headline read like when you come to a close?
Bob Marley, Africa Unite, us together, and let's not sugarcoat this. This is not a beautiful song. This is not a beautiful title. This is a very difficult reality that journalists are sharing. News are very difficult to share if we do not have the means to go to the ground, if we do not have the means to expand and share with the world. Because Africa is, yes, we are a continent and we need to focus on ourselves and work. We need to do that. But at every level, we are so petit when it comes to the rest of the world. And that is our responsibility. That is our work. And the media has a lot of power on that. It will take us journalists to make Africa beautiful to the rest of the world, for the world to see the beauty of Africa. If we do not see what is beautiful of us, about the continent, and from the most local communities, the world will not see. We still have those stereotypes that we mentioned from the very beginning of our conversation. And they're very real. So not sugarcoating, not making it sound like we are close to, our desired understanding of what Africa is. We may have that desire as Africans. We may even see its progress as Africans, but the rest of the world is not seeing it. The rest of the world still feels that they need to come to rescue the continent. They still need to come to rescue with, more new technology, more, we're not talking about people in shackles. We're not talking about, we're talking about the outside world coming to us to share our story. And that's where the lion comes back. We need to give power to that lion. Our lions are hungry to have the power over the continent again. So let's just work. Okay. Let's get to work. Christine said it. Let's get to work, and let's not overlook the smallest story that's out there. Somebody out there has a beautiful story to share. Somebody out there has something of resilience to share. And let's just put that in the bigger narrative. And then we see that the world will understand what Africa is about. And let's stay together. Okay. Let's stay together. Solidarity among us journalists is extremely important.
Thanks for that, Boso.
Let's together.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I love that particular headline, even as we bring this particular discussion to a close. Africa Unite. That's why we're having this particular conversation, to see how we can actually make that headline a reality. Boso Tal, freelance journalist from Senegal. We're joined by Tekla Wilkie as well, Nigerian Television Authority anchor from Abuja, and Christine Mongai right here in Nairobi. Many thanks, Liz, for making time and for being part of this particular conversation. Thank you so much for that. We're bringing this particular conversation to a close at this particular point in time. And even as we do that, we just want to say we'd like to get your feedback as well on this. You can get us on the Aladi socials scrolling at the bottom of your screen. We bring this to a close at this particular point. Until next time, my name is Jeff Mote. Bye-bye.